There's a moment in history where wood wasn't just lumber, it was life. It held up homes, kept storms out, carried armies across rivers, and powered mills that, fed entire towns. But tucked away in those dusty monastic notes and guild scribbles is a technique so effective, so shockingly durable, that many of the timber structures built with it outlasted the stone around them. And the wild part? Most modern builders don't use it. They don't even talk about it. Yet medieval craftsmen used it to create buildings that survived fire, ice, war, and centuries of decay. This isn't nostalgia. This is material science born from observation, patience, and survival. And if you're a historian, a survivalist, or just someone who appreciates the kind of knowledge that, refuses to die, this lost method is something you can actually use today. Where the secret really begins is in the timing of the cut. Medieval craftsmen didn't march into the forest whenever they felt like it. They followed a rhythm older than any guild rulebook. Winterfelling wasn't superstition, it was strategy. When temperatures crashed, the tree's sap thickened. The living system inside the trunk slowed to a crawl, and that thicker, resin-heavy sap acted like a built-in preservative. Instead of bleeding the logs dry like we do with kiln drying, they kept the sap inside. They let the timber cure slowly, stacked off the ground, covered from snow, exposed to airflow but not direct sun. Months passed. Sometimes years, but with every passing season the wood hardened, stabilized, and toughened. Modern pressure-treated lumber, it forces chemicals into pores that have already been compromised. The medieval technique, on the other hand, strengthened those pores from within. If you're building off-grid or storing logs for a future cabin, this alone can mean the difference between solid beams and boards that twist like rope after one hot summer. Medieval timber masters understood something modern sawmills, I suppose, have forgotten. The grain is the spine of the wood. Sawing slices straight through it, splitting follows it. When they needed beams, posts, or planks, they cracked logs open along their natural lines using wedges. No ripping, no tearing, just clean, continuous fibres. This mattered because uninterrupted fibres carry load better. They resist warping better. They breathe better. And in cold regions they survive freeze-thaw cycles without twisting themselves out of alignment. That's why so many early northern European buildings, some over 600 years old, still stand with their original frames intact. If you want to try it today, you should start with a straight-grained log. Score both ends, just like the old masters did. Then tap a wedge into the line and honestly let the wood guide the break. You end up with material that feels alive, responsive and tough in a way milled boards simply aren't. Forget nails, forget screws. Metal was costly, unreliable, and in winter it could turn brittle. Medieval joints were wood-on-wood systems, engineered to move with storms, shifts in the soil, and seasonal expansion. Mortise and tenon joints weren't decorative, they were survival architecture. Craftsmen rubbed these joint faces with natural lubricants like resin tallow or boiled linseed. That coating kept moisture out and allowed the pieces to lock in without grinding themselves apart. Pegs, always hardwood, would swell slightly when damp, tightening the joint even more. No hammering a nail back in, no rust, no fracture. You know, you can apply this today even if you're not building a cathedral. A small off-grid shed built with peg joinery feels almost shockingly rigid. And when storms come through, well, it flexes instead of snapping. This is the part almost no one talks about. Old manuscripts describe a mixture of charcoal dust, tannin-rich water, and now and then a bit of pine tar. When brushed onto cured timber, it bonded into a thin mineral organic shell. Charcoal added mild antiseptic properties. Tannins created a hardened water-resistant layer. Pine tar added elasticity and insect resistance. Not decorative, functional. Granaries used it because, well, they couldn't afford rot. Storehouses used it because a wet beam could just ruin a village's food supply. You can, you know, recreate this today with 2 simple steps. First, boil water with oak or acacia bark to extract tannins. Then mix fine charcoal dust into the hot liquid until it forms a smooth slurry. Brush onto cured wood in thin layers. Let it dry. The finish doesn't shine. It just, well, armours the timber. If you want to replicate the full system, well, you need to treat it as an old-world process, not just a modern checklist. You should cut in winter when the sap slows, store the wood off the ground, under airflow, split instead of saw whenever possible. Use joinery that locks wood to wood, not metal to wood. Finish with a charcoal-tannin coating for external surfaces. The result is timber that honestly behaves quite differently. It's stronger, denser, more stable. Ideal for cabins, barns, tool sheds, survival shelters, and even furniture built to last beyond your lifetime. Norwegian stave churches restored using Winterfelling timber simply don't warp. Rebuilt medieval barns in Germany rely on split beams because, well, mills just couldn't replicate the strength. Archaeologists in the United Kingdom have built entire halls using these same methods, and, you know, even after many years, the wood shows barely any decay. A small cabin built with this technique can actually outlast modern pressure-treated lumber, because really the structure isn't fighting itself. The fibres, the sap, the joints, the finish, they all work with the nature of the tree, not against it. What this lost method really tells us about medieval builders is, well, they weren't guessing, they weren't slow, they weren't primitive, they were observant. They understood trees as living things, not just raw material. When you work with timber in this way, you start to feel it too. They treated wood like a partner in construction, not something to conquer. Industrial sawmills didn't replace this method because it was worse. They replaced it because it was slower. But slow built cities that survived for centuries. Slow kept roofs standing through war, storms and time. Slow created a science of timber far ahead of what most modern builders recognize. If you want more lost engineering, forgotten skills, and powerful old-world methods that still outperform modern shortcuts, make sure you subscribe to HistoryHQ and share this video. These are the techniques that kept communities alive. and they deserve to live again.